This will be a video response to Emily Jane's video titled Question to Atheist: What Makes You Not Want to Be Part of Christianity? Well, I doubt you know who I am, but as you might have guessed, I am an atheist, more specifically an agnostic atheist, meaning I don't currently believe in the existence of your particular God, nor any other. But it wasn't always that way. I was what you might consider a moderate Protestant Christian. And this was when I was around 11 years old. And I stopped believing when I was around 14. And at the time, I would have answered that, well, I just could not see any reason to believe in a God because I just don't see any evidence to suggest that your particular God or any other exists. I'm a little older now, and after doing a bit of research, after viewing the world through a completely different lens, there are a lot of reasons why I wouldn't be a Christian even if your God existed. I don't particularly like how I am told to worship this God without questioning. I don't like not being able to ask questions, and I don't like being told to just obey and hope for the best without seeing some results or a good reason why I should obey. As you might have guessed, this sort of non-thinking is exactly what has led to so much bloodshed on not only your part, but the part of other religions as well. And I'm not going to try and point the finger at who takes the most blame, but again, in my personal opinion, the number one offender has to be Christians, by far. But I don't have to look at history to show exactly why I think Christians really need to take a deeper look into what they believe in. And you might not want to accept this, but I'll just give it to you straight. Christians think they have some sort of superiority to everyone else when they do not. And I know this is not limited to just Christians, once again, but I find that, yeah, it tends to be the Christians that seem to have this superior attitude, this holier than thou sort of face that they put forth, and they don't even make an attempt to hide it. It's very thinly veiled. If you want me to give you an example, just look at how Christians have been treating the education system when they attempt to put forth the premises of intelligent design, and yet they would so hypocritically dismiss the idea of, I don't know, some other intelligent designer other than their particular god of choice. Look at how Christians treat atheists and non-believers when they're dying on their deathbeds, when society would so easily accept the idea of a Christian coming to a dying man and say, "Oh, well, I know you didn't believe in God, but maybe if you decided to repent, you might go to heaven." When an atheist would definitely not be granted that sort of privilege, when they wouldn't even think about doing something like that without fear of being looked down upon in society. That's the sort of double standard I'm talking about. Oh, and let's not forget how when Christians can so easily say, "Oh, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe as we do. If you don't have Jesus in your heart, then we'll kiss your ass goodbye." Perfectly moral, perfectly acceptable to say in society, but when we atheists call out the rather obvious and tell you how morally reprehensible it is that you would so easily allow billions of people to suffer at the expense of the few who get free passage into heaven, we're called bigots. Religion, and yours included, ruins lives. It hurts people. It kills relationships, from families and friends to brothers and sisters to loved ones. And I think the world could do better without that. Now, if you're going to claim that these are all just the actions of the few believers who might be considered extremists, then that would be essentially like saying, well, there's nothing inherently wrong with eugenics. It's just those few bad Nazis that did a few awful things here and there, but you can't judge the belief system based on the actions of the believers. And true, I'm not going to judge the belief, the system of belief based on the actions of the believers. But when you look closer, when you look into Christian doctrine from an objective point of view, how hateful it really is, how it propagates such ideals as killing your own son because your God told you to do so, such as massacring entire nations because of the will of your particular God. Ideals like slavery, ideals like persecution against non believers. You really have to wonder if Christians really do consider these things. This isn't only your religion, but for any religion that tries to propagate the idea of divine intervention, miracles, etc., how people do not realize that this is so selfish and so self-righteous is a mystery to me, that you think that God is only helping you, that God, out of everyone else who dies painful, miserable, agonizing deaths, decides to help you in your little daily skirmish. I find that to be definitely one thing that people ought to consider. But you know what? I could forgive all of that, and I really do mean all of it, that's saying something, if it weren't for one thing. The one thing that I really just can't forgive is the way that Christians react when I tell them all of this. That when any atheist informs them of any number of the things that I've just mentioned, how they react is something I cannot forgive. And one thing that goes along with this that I find Christians really do have an infamous reputation for doing is trying to pass it off as if they weren't included in any of this. Like marketing Christianity as not a religion, as if it was so different from all the other Abrahamic faiths that have caused so much bloodshed in the past. This slick marketing scheme of Christianity isn't a religion has something that's always irked me, even when I was a Christian. And it's something that I absolutely can't stand now. But perhaps even worse than that is when Christians don't try. When they brush it off and try and sell me something else, like, why don't you look at some of the good things that Christians have done? As if any amount of charity work would forgive them for all the trouble that they have and continue to cause in the past, the present, and most likely the future. If you wouldn't say the same thing if a serial killer said on the stand, well, I did kill those people, but why don't you take a look at some of the charity work I did? That's the sort of logic, that's the sort of morally reprehensible thinking that I can't stand. But maybe just to add insult to injury would be how some Christians expect to be praised for all of this, as if having faith gave them a passage to do whatever the hell they wanted to without fear of criticism. And when someone like me does step up to the plate and calls people out on this stuff, they cower away under the flimsy and yet somehow believable excuse of religious persecution. And people like me are then labeled as bigots. That really pisses me off. So I guess the much shortened version of my answer to your question of why I can't be a Christian would be because I have too much respect for human life. There's my answer.